Hello, this is Brian Whitten and ET Art. Welcome back to my channel. I know I've said it was going to be the last video I made, my last one, but I thought I would come back today because I can confirm something that I put up as a possible scenario with the sun's planes, but it was something that I wasn't 100% sure of. I'll get to that in a minute. I wanted to start today with this alloy megalith or pillar that were found around the world recently. I did mention this in one of my last videos. This is compliments of abc4.com. It's a freeze frame. I think I actually got this off the Facebook. Somebody had uploaded it and I downloaded an image. What I wanted to do today was explain a few things before I go on. If you are 12 or younger, could you please get your parents to watch this video? If they say it's okay, that's fine. For everybody else who's been on my channel, I won't go back over too much. There is a few things I will go back over, a couple of the plates, to understand where I want to go today. And I've labelled this video, as you can see, the pole shift and confined space. And it's very relative because of where I did leave my last video, especially in the confined space department. But we will talk about, before I move on, a little bit to do with evolution, because it's in actual fact an important part of the understanding of where we're going to go. This pillar, if you look right behind it here, has a feature in the rocks, a facial feature. It looks to be somewhat like a turtle or possibly a dinosaur head or something of that nature, a reptile of the past. I wanted to mention that because also directly above the pillar is right at the end of that red line there. So if I go up from the red line, right above the pillar is this. It's the very same face, facial feature here in his eye, and there's a dog there. That dog is what that's representing. It's representing a being and his pet, or his domesticated pet. It's a very important thing to know, because it in actual fact is showing the evolution of this person in multiple areas. I'll show you something else. And now comparing the image we just saw of the profile of the man or being above the pillar in Utah, it's the same profile here. This is the Sphinx in Egypt in about the early 30s, before it was modified under the guise of renovations. We have a 3-cycle evolutionary period from here to here to here, over millions of years. I'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to show you that, and the reason why I wanted to show you that is I also have found exactly the same process, being multiple beings or multiple paths shown us. But I wanted to let you see that first, and I'll show you one other of almost the same type of thing, that is a being and his pet, or his domesticated pet. I just wanted to show you before I went away that that is in actual fact a view further back from the Sphinx, and you can see I haven't dodged or bodged anything up. It's in actual fact a real photo. That's it there, and this guy here, you can even see his eye. You know, it's so obvious that that's the situation. It was that obvious. They changed it so we would not learn the truth, and it's a very, very sad thing to have our truth of mankind and his history hidden from us, but we will get to why that actually happened very shortly. This image is not as clear, but it once again was the same thing. It's out of a video I posted called Cuts in Australia. It's got a drover here in his nose, and he's smiling, his nose, and he's got a slouch hat on, and in the background here you have his dog with his ear up here and his dog in his mouth here. That's once again a more modern being and his pet. This was actually Cuts in Australia. I won't go through that. I just wanted to show you, but once again we see the same thing here of a being and his pet. And I think when we look at the following image, we can assume pretty safely then, especially when some of this that I'm showing you here is microscopic, is that that was the evolutionary path of the reptilians, or us, our ancestors, a bird-like reptile type creature that we evolved from, that the reptilians, or a reptile, became extremely intelligent as well. I will show you a couple of other rock images that express the same thing. This image here is one of a Mayan relief, I believe, or I should say a Mayan artifact, depicting the same type of thing. In other words, a pet, a domesticated animal to a hominoid, and that over the millions of years of evolution, the hominoid's pet or domesticated animal became equally smart. It says that on this other rock at a microscopic level. I'll show you this. This is the same again. We are looking at, as we saw, the dinosaur, the being or the hominoid riding the dinosaur had this on his head. Humans have a suture down their head like this. He's saying that he got really smart, this dinosaur. This is who he became. This guy here is an evolutionary path. That's why he's wearing glasses on this picture here. I want to put this rock that this image come from. I know that's not exceptionally clear. It's photographed off a photograph, and therefore, to a degree, it was obviously photographed off the television, so it's not as good. But I did put this rock under the microscope. We're going to have to look at a few things, because there is another being with this crested head, and he is on the very same rock that came from. So I'm going to show you that today as well. Now, I know this one isn't as clear. It is really quite difficult to capture a video, or should say capture a still image and put it back up as clear as I want, especially when I'm taking a video of the camera, a video of the TV. So, you know, I understand we're going to get some degradation. I want you to keep your eye on this as I move the light around. As I showed you with the Sphinx on the right side, you look at the inserted image, it's more of a bullish, bull-nose type of, you know, nose he has on, rather than the smoother side on the left-hand side of the Sphinx. Now come back to here and have a look here. This is the one I want you to watch. As I go through these, I'm moving the light. So this is a video, and I'm freeze-framing portions of the video so you can see what the changes in light do. And they make this guy here turn into this guy. So in other words, this is beyond us, beyond the evolution of human life here, many, many millions of years. This guy here on this side is becoming a large skull grey alien, and this guy here is got his snout just coming out here. I'll do one more and just show you a couple more. You can see that here it's the same again. He's becoming more visible in here, and this one too is becoming more visible, and doesn't have a nose here. Okay, and his head is back here, so he's like a big headed individual. The interesting part here is when you've got to the end of this, that is who it is. And I'll be honest with you, there's only one person that looks like that. That's a North American Indian. And it is no doubt that that's who that is, this person here. It's really obvious in the video. It's really quite difficult this way to get it so clear. I wanted to show you that, and I'll show you the other rock now and show you the other images on it. Now this is the rock. This is one side of the rock, and we pick these up because I've picked up rocks for a long time. I've always found some of them very interesting long before I realised how the history of Earth and mankind is written on them in such an exquisite manner. I will show you where we go with this, but I wanted to show you that side of the rock first, and to give you an idea that is the rock. That's one side. This is the rock, the other side of the same rock. And we're concentrating on this little chip here in this corner, and I'll show you the size of the rock as compared to a cigarette lighter and give you an idea. And that isn't a big cigarette lighter, okay? Just in case you may be thinking I'm fooling you, I'm not. That is a normal type big cigarette lighter. And if I go back to that first image, now I'm going to zoom in on this corner because I've actually got this very sharply focused with my good camera. into this corner here, and it was this corner here that I wanted to come into. I then put this portion here under the microscope and shine the light from different angles to get the information that's hidden within this little chip part of the rock. I know that sounds silly, but I want you to be aware of here. This crested head and this eye and nose and lips, because as I move around I focus more on this than I have on this, and I just wanted to show you that that's the portion of the rock, and once again you'll see how big it is compared to a cigarette lighter. So you can get an idea, and you can see, almost see the very pyramid I talk of right here in that portion of the rock. Now I'm going to show you once again that's the size of the rock compared to a lighter, and I'll go through these. Once again that's focused again, and you can see now I've changed the light angle a little bit differently. This one was taken outside, I think, and I twisted it around a little bit in the sunlight, although I didn't get the focus very sharp. But the colours that come out in this at night time when I'm doing this with a microscope, they are mind-blowing, I'm not kidding. And I have put this up before, this rock. Spent quite a lot of time, doing bits and pieces with it. But today I wanted to go through the other images. Now I've turned the outside lights off, or the microscope light off, and I'm now just using my external light around the outside of that cracked portion of the rock, just to show you what comes up. Once again, like I said, you can see clearly, or probably more clearly there, the pyramid shape start to take place, but I will keep going here because it's in actual fact this crested headed being here that seems to be, we seem to be getting told about. And I haven't spent a lot of time on that before. I just wanted to show you that it also does, to a degree, bring in another being here, not just the dinosaur that I've shown you before. I've also said that there's one of these, we can get the light in right, it looks like the megaliths are dropping down in this beam or whatever. But I won't get too carried away with that today. I just wanted to show you that it would appear to me to be that there is another being outside, because if I show you this inserted image, which is the dinosaur wearing glasses, it actually was in this portion here. You see the glasses line is gone now. Why? Because it's not needed anymore. I know that sounds silly. Once again, you see the pyramid shape a little bit more prevalent in that one, and even more so in this one. But here you start to get this guy and his features out a little bit more. See, we change the light angle, and you've got nothing here now, and the pyramid sort of half disappeared. So it's a very minute movement of the light around in front of the rock that brings all this out, brings the information out for you. I'm going to go along here quickly. I did spend a little bit of time here. I might go back to that rock. There is something else in there that I will go and have a look at one day. I wanted to show you the last few here because he becomes a little bit more prevalent in these last few here. This guy here. And I clean all this off. I actually go and give that a dust over. And this is the one here. I just left it on that one, but you can see here his eyes highlighted, his nose is here, and he's got this crested head. This is not the only one I've seen that he is, in actual fact, been on many other rocks as well, a crested head. And I wonder, as to our suture, the human skull has a crack down the middle of its head, whether or not it left us this, because his face looks very human like us, and he's not got a crested head like the ones on the pyramids. So I'm wondering, is another being? Did this being evolve from another reptile? So this is a possibility of what we've been told. I wanted to leave you with that, but basically I wanted to touch on that evolutionary side of things, that how long it's been. It's millions and millions of years. I want to show you one other thing. Well, I'll show you the plates now, and we'll discuss the plates that I've shown you at this point. Now, I've shown you this plate before. I wanted to clarify a couple of things. There's 3 plates that I want to discuss today. What we're talking about here in the instance of this one is the movement of Earth on the horizontal plane in the manner in which it comes back into the inner ring here very, very quickly. And on this one I will show you the cycle. The cycle's the same to a degree on the other one, but there's a bit of a difference. Notice in this one we haven't got anything in the middle. What we've got here is a distance from the middle to there, and from there to there being half. This is the inner ring of rotation of Earth, and this is the outer ring. The inner ring is 93 million miles, the outer ring is 186 million miles. The reason why I want to put that back to us here at this point is to understand the 186 million mile out here from the Sun. There is no humans on the planet out here. I'm not saying there's not life on the planet. It would be covered in ice. Life would be below the ice sheets. But there are no humans there. Certainly not the way we think of humans here. It would be covered in ice. If there were, they would be underground and have transit to and from another place to be able to get food, because you couldn't grow it. It's impossible. The reason why I wanted to mention that is to say, okay, well, if Earth's out there and nobody's on it, well then really they're telling us in the same thing here, that Earth is not the home planet of man at any point. It's just not the home planet. It wouldn't be out there, and it's not a one-off sort of thing. It's also 186 million miles from the Sun, 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light. So what we're actually seeing there is a reflection of the speed of light. And we're saying that Earth isn't the prime place of the birth of humanity. Otherwise it wouldn't be that like this. It's actually telling us that. So in actual fact they're saying when they do that, Earth is actually, in the current situation it's in, is an expendable item. I've said that before. They have the smarts to pick everybody off this planet they want and just take who they want and leave the rest here to suffer the consequences of this radical speed and movement. I don't think they will. I think it's more the other way around. They give options, which is why my process would be here. They let the leaders know, and they have a given amount of time, and their addresses, a delivery address from this process is figured out depending on what they do. So that's what I think we're seeing here, without doubt. We're getting told that the Earth is inexpendable. It's not the root planet of the system. It's certainly not the root planet of mankind. And in its speed and in its position out here, and knowing how far it is away, they are mentioning the speed of light for more than one reason. They are saying that we had already achieved light speed before all this happened. That's what I'm saying, why I wanted to start off with that evolutionary aspect. That we had already evolved to the point we had left our own star system. We had achieved light speed. We had achieved many, many things. We were really, really, really smart long before a problem came along. And I've said to you before that when you have the ability to travel at light speed and go in and out of different planets and live that long, to evolve that long, you are not stupid. You know your own physiology, and you would know about problems with breeding and all such things, with electromagnetic fields and how they would affect a human genome or the genome of whoever we were at the time. You know, if you want to call us humans, you know, we have this concept that we evolved from apes because that's what we get taught. It's a load of hogwash. And obviously they're telling us we evolved with the reptiles, and the reptilians, we evolved from a hominoid species, and some of the reptilians have evolved from the fact that they were used as domestic animals and domestic pets and such a thing, which is why I wanted to start the way I did today. That's one plate I wanted to show you. You notice in here that there is no moon mentioned in this cycle here. And I've said to you before that I reckon that sometimes you come up and the movement of the moon in and out here is not the case. That this be one of the cycles it represents, whereas the other cycle, it represents the moon moving in and out and changing, and I'll show you that very shortly. Once again you see these swirls left and right, like a 6 and a 9, are in actual fact saying that when the planet is moved back in here is when the change of rotation on the planet's axis has changed, so it's either spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise on its axis. The cycle comes in and either goes that way for 16,000 years. It does the 6,000 year cycle we've just done, or just about to finish, which in our instance it comes back and sends it back going around the sun in an anti-clockwise direction on the inner ring, which is where we are approaching that point at the moment. This shift of this plane, if you imagine that plate as being the plane, the planet shifts against this plane, okay? So the plane of rotation of Earth shifts against that of the sun. It's a little bit difficult to fathom. I will tell you something, or show you something shortly that will make that more understandable. If I click on this image here and show you that if we looked at a gyroscope, in our instance, when we're talking about the Earth, just say it's coming along here and it's going anti-clockwise, it's coming along here going clockwise direction around the sun, and it's hit here, okay? And this plane here, the Earth's plane, is then moved from here down this way, okay? The Earth still sits like this the whole time. That's why there has to be two comings, because when you get to this point and this point here, which is very important because I will discuss this in something very shortly, the north and south aspect of Earth is retained. So we're getting 3 months here with the Earth above the sun, and 3 months here with the Earth below the sun. You're either getting full sun on half the globe for nearly 3 months and full winter at the same time. You know, I should say up here, full winter at the northern pole, and up here you would have full summer at the southern pole, and vice versa when you're down here. So that's why there's two comings. That's why they say, you know, the second coming. The second coming is because they come back over here when your movement is this way and the pivot is here, right? So in other words, the plane of rotation of Earth, this one, it pivots from this point 90 degrees away from its impact, and that's what happens. The Earth in this part is unlivable, certainly unlivable as civilization, unless you had the ability to move you and all the people with you to another part of the globe and then come back and go back and so on a yearly basis. Would certainly be, and then like I said, the part you can go to is really fine. It's a very small amount of space, an area on the globe near the equator. I'll be honest with you, I don't know, I live in Australia, and we have Aboriginals in our country that say they've been here for 40,000 years. I'll do this inserted image. This thing here that tilts the Earth's axis 6,000 years ago, I'm afraid, gentlemen, you have been lied to as much as I have by your elders, just the same way I have been by my historians. It's impossible to live through that event, and that's the first one. There was another, 6 of them that big on the same day. It all took 34 minutes. The Earth's surface moved at a speed of I mean, honestly, there is nobody, and the waves were huge. They swept our motions right across. I doubt anybody would have lived through it at all. And that's why they say the second coming. It's not the second coming just for Christians or whatever. It's the second coming for all of us, because there's no way in the world we could have lived through that. It really couldn't have. And I did say at one part of my videos long ago, before I understand the whole lot, the likelihood anybody lived through that event, look at the size of the thing. And I'll tell you something else, that's 700 kilometres wide, and that's the pointy part. It was about 2,400 kilometres long. There's something like it up in space at the moment. Very long shard, flung like an arrow. And it was the impact, might have been, like I said, 700 kilometres wide. It would be in excess of 4 times longer, which is why I think that's the other reason why we see 4 written in Roman numerals on this rock here. The precession of Earth itself is said to be 27,000 years. It may have been 2,700 kilometres long. It was far longer than it was wide. And look at what it did. It moved the whole mass of Earth. And honestly, I can't see any of us living here, ladies and gents, any of us. I believe all our ancestors were taken off. Any ones that were put back on after the event happened, then they restocked the globe. And they don't have to do that at this point in time. There's enough information left here to tell us how they manage the globe, cut the lands up, move them away from the equator and do all such things, so that they don't have to crash comets in it to get it to come back and stop this, this thing happening. Now I wanted to show you that, and the reason why I wanted to show you that is because there is another plate, this one here, which is the same type of thing. It's still talking about the event of the Earth here. In other words, the events of the Earth rotating on the inner and outer ring. But the inner ring here, when we come back up into the inner ring, there is a time here where the moon is made cycle in and out, in sync with the Earth, every 3 months. Sorry, every 4 months. So there's your 1 year. Now before I go on with the last plate I want to show you, I wanted to come back to this parchment just to discuss the solar cycle. So in other words, we're not talking about Earth cycles now. If we were, we would be talking, these men here on these 4 rows are in actual fact a cycle of Earth. There's 44, 22 on each line here. The total of that is 88,000 years for a cycle. Up here we've got 4 by 11, 4 by 11 counted in the legs of these men going across. The red ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 by 44,000 year cycle, 2 by 48,000 year cycles, which is 4 by 12 on those two, and the last one is 5 by 13, which is a 65,000 year cycle. And there was only one of those. Now I wanted to just show you something. The reason I wanted to come back here is because I had theorized that what we were seeing here was the solar plane, the solar cycle here. So in other words, a complete solar cycle would do that many years and then come back to the start. Okay, and if I laid out how the solar plane shifted, I'm not talking about the rotational plane of Earth here, I'm talking about that horizontal plane that we come up to meet, that it shifts as well. And it's made shift driven by the mass of planets built up either on the inner solar system, say from beyond Mars, where our outer ring is 186 million miles from the Sun, that location at 186 million miles is the end of the plane. It may be that that's even broken into more parts. I don't design suns and planes. I'm just saying the message that we're seeing. We are seeing that, in my opinion, telling us a complete solar cycle. The reason I wanted to come back there is because this is how I proposed the plane shifted. In other words, it took 44,000 years to shift 1/4 of the way round, 48,000 years to come 2/4 of the way back, and then the plane itself shifted. That's why I wanted to go back and show you how the sun, how the Earth moved around the sun and the plane shifted, because the sun's plane does exactly the same thing. And I thought, I wasn't 100% sure whether that flip of the plane like this, it took 65,000 years. So that plane that we're looking at, that plate, where it shifts this way, shifts that way, but then it can flip this way. It can flip 180 degrees, just as the plane of rotation of Earth does around the sun in the 6,000 year cycle. Here we see that that is a completed cycle, and that 65,000 year cycle is in actual fact the one that drives us back to the start. Because in actual fact that's what it does. That's one way the cycle could complete and put us back to where we begun, right here. And then the reason why I wanted to show you that is the difference between that and the last plate. This is the last plate. Those first two images that I showed you of the plate are they're still the solar plane, but because of the ratio between the centre and the outside, you realise they're talking about Earth's rings of rotation on the horizontal plane. This is different. Notice the orderly fashion in which these are fit here. This is where this is telling us is how often this flips over. And this plate, you can count them all. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see the numbers there. I might even do an insert here for you as well of that image. So you can see the numbers. I've counted all these down the plate here, numbered them here. There's 35 in that portion, 35 in that portion, and then the numbers either side. When you add them all up, and you know that from the other parchment it's 337,000 years per one of those getting done, which is the flip of the plane. And this is going to be the one showing us the flip of the plane. That's why it's always fixed. It's the same every time. The others vary, 44, 48. So they're not going to be, that's why they're scattered around the plate, because it's a varying time. This is not. This is fixed. This is telling us exactly how long it is each time that that plate or that plate or plane flips like that on the sun's horizontal plane. It flips and it's driving everything the other way. Whatever stays in the plane is exactly what happens, and that's why we get those two plates. I had a friend from the Middle East send me these pictures only yesterday because I said I was going to put another video up. This is the pyramid complex in Cairo, and we've discussed, have we not, the cycles. 44,000 years, 48,000 years, and 65,000 years. And I started to think about the pyramids and their size, and I thought and then realised that I actually believe that what we're actually being told, and we know that there's a lot more 44,000 year cycles. There's two 48,000 year cycles. This one, if you look at it from the top, is, yeah, we've got four, right, but it's also divided like this. You can see that this Grand Pyramid, if you move back in here, is actually an 8-sided pyramid. It's visible in the light on this one, whereas this one isn't. So in actual fact it's got twice as many, isn't it, as this, twice as many sides. So we're looking at the very same thing as the parchment. There are four 44,000 year cycles and only two 48,000 year cycles. Is that one right? So the bigger one is this one. This is the Grand Pyramid. This is the Pyramid of Khafre. What I wanted to talk to you about is here. This little one down here. It's actually 65 meters high. I want to show you something. The height of these pyramids. Now this is just a wikimedia.org. You can see up here. That's where I got this image. Like I said, I don't make any money on my channel. It's an educational purpose, that's all it's here for. These are the three pyramids of Giza that we're talking about here, and when we add the height in meters of all of them, we get 339. The solar cycle that I just showed you was 337, but since it was here, we've added 2,000 years, which is 2,000 years ago. So 339 is correct. And the pyramid in question that I wanted to show you here is this pyramid here, 65 meters high, which is exactly the last cycle. There's only one of them. And it's 65,000 years that it takes to complete. I wanted to show you that because it's very important to know that, because it, in actual fact, without doubt, is setting our date and our time. Without doubt, it is doing exactly that, and I'll show you why. When I bring up this diagram here, which is a diagram of the pyramid complex that I showed you, and this is the pyramid in question. It's the smaller one down here in this portion here, and the three little pyramids are beside it here. What it's doing, and I did put up a video some time back, these structures up here, if you look at the bend of the movement of the bend here, what it's telling us, and I thought this was tracking Nibiru. It is not. Nibiru goes that fast through, you couldn't do anything with it. But what this is tracking, it's actually tracking the sunrise. And it's showing you how many hours of sunlight you get in months that you're affected with nearly no sun at all. It's the second thing that does that, and it goes like this. And why I wanted to bring where it tracks that from here, and that's why these are plotted across like this. It's showing you how far the sun rises, how far that shade of that pyramid is reaching before it goes back and disappears again, because that's what it's doing. It's tracking it on the edge of this pyramid here, and that is showing you how far the sun rises. And it's not the only thing. It does exactly the same thing as this device is the very same thing. It's showing us exactly the same thing, and that the amount of hours in a day looking south, this is in Saudi Arabia, once again it's telling us the very same story, that in that given period of the year, for 3 months, you get no sun, it's zero, like, you know, an hour or two a day. It would be freezing cold, 2 hours a day, 4 hours a day, so on. That's what it's telling you. And when you come back this side, where do you got to go? You've got to get inside. Why? Because you've nearly got 3 months of full sun. You've either got sun over you all day, and it doesn't set. It just drops down lower in the sky and then lifts back up and spirals around you above the sky. It would burn you. That's why it's like this. This is why you've got a count of 3 here. You've got to get inside, under the rocks, inside. And that is why that is the way it is. And the reason I wanted to show you all of this was to say that in actual fact that plate is going to be correct. So we come back to the plate now and understand that what we've just seen is the pyramid in Cairo and the temple in Saudi Arabia are doing exactly the same thing. They're both pointing south at the sun, looking at it rise and set. When it's the earth doing the movement that is represented by this plate. But in the plate here, we're talking about the 65,000 year cycle of Earth, and it only flips once every 339 or 337,000 years. From that, we can then deduce the very length of time that it's taken for the entire lot to happen from the day the manipulation of the sun, moon and earth had to be put into place. So in other words, when the corruption happened, and if we calculate these figures, like I said, I've counted them all, we are looking at over 81 million years. That is how long ago the event happened that caused this corruption. And like I said in the first instance on the other plate, when we're talking about Earth's changing plane of rotation around the sun, this is talking about the very horizontal plane flipping over, and does it once in a 65,000 year cycle that it happens, but it all happens at the end of what is the 337,000 year cycle. I know when we look at our parchment, we get 339 is the height of all the pyramids. It's because it's 2,000 years longer. That is why we get an extra 2 meters. It could be a slight error on the measurement of the pyramids as well, but I would expect that that's actually what's happened. We've gone to a situation where it was going to be known now, right where we are. Now I have prepared another diagram here to explain a little bit more clearly what I needed to do to explain how the pole shift happens within this 65,000 year cycle, or at least my opinion from what we're seeing. There's something else I was sent, I will show you shortly, from a friend of mine called Eva, and thank you Eva, because as soon as I saw it I thought that's exactly what I was doing yesterday. I've actually skipped a day here and I've canned the upload that I've spent a while because I realised I hadn't really explained something as well as I should have. If we're looking at this disc here being representative of the disc that we've spoken of that represents the movement or flip of the plane, and we're talking about the sun's horizontal plane at this point, which is spinning anti-clockwise. I've left off the 2 vertical clockwise fields of the sun off this diagram just purely for ease of explanation, and I will move on from that point of where we were. If we look about the Earth, and this being the outer ring of rotation, which is 186 million miles from the sun, and then Earth being pushed back in here, we know that the transition between here and here, Earth is always laid over flat during its cycles, all of it. It's laid over, twisted like this. It does the 4,000 year off-plane cycle from about this point into here, and it's not actually till it's stood up here that the change of the rotation of Earth on its axis takes place. In the instance here where we're getting pushed back in, I've told you to this point about a balloon field and a very, very narrow portion. It's only just showing the very narrow portion if we could imagine orange peel after orange peel after orange peel, there is in actual fact 7 rings of very narrow concentrated magnetic field of the Sun, and another 7 beyond there, 6 or 7 beyond Earth. It was actually 7 from there to our outer ring of rotation, and another 6 going back in as well. So there's 13 rings between the Sun and the outer ring. But in between the very narrow portions, there is a very big portion, the part that's in the orange peel part of the field. When Earth gets pushed back in here, in this instance, in the first part of the 65,000 year cycle, we know that we have 16 going one way, 16 going the other way, and the addition between either 44 or 48, and if we assume 48, because in actual fact up until this point it is the next cycle after a 48,000 year cycle, with this plane here drifting, but only drifting this way. It's still spinning this way, spinning clockwise, but it's drifting backwards as opposed to drifting forwards, and that's what that, that the movement of that plane does. So this plane either spins the way it's going, but it either spins faster or it spins slower in respect to a given point. That is where we're getting the change from the 44 to 48,000 years. So it's drifting back this way, still spinning anti-clockwise. The 2 vertical planes are spinning clockwise. The Earth, when it gets into here, does not come into the narrow portion of the field. I'll do an inserted diagram here. It isn't the best way of showing you, but I will put it in here anyway. Where those fields are confined and stop, top and bottom, think of them as not stopping. They go all the way over to the other side of the globe, and each corresponding balloon field or orange peel field is like that. So what I would expect to see, that when Earth comes in here, the Moon, we know, is in a fixed position, locked into the Sun's horizontal plane, rotating around the Sun, or cycling around the Sun, I should say. The Earth then, when it comes back in, is timed to link up with the Moon, but instead of it actually doing anything, I think what we're going to see in the balloon field is the movement of the Earth up and down like this. So it'll be stood up, but it will not be on the narrow the narrow portion, because there's the Moon's locked into it. So it's going to sit like this, going up and down across this field, and that'll be how you're going to drive summer and winter and spring. You're still going to intersect with the Moon, and at its closest point, obviously the people that are on the planet, at its closest point, I would expect. It may be that with the amount of months of ovulation taking place here, may not be as much as what it is now, but it could be far more than what you get when you go to the cycle where the Moon's going to be pushed away from Earth, back in here and back out again, driven by the inner planets on this new cycle. But in this case, we're going to talk about the 65,000 year cycle. When we look at the 48,000 years, it's exactly 17,000 years more than the 48,000 year cycle. 17, I'm going to take 5 away from it, because there is a 5,000 year cycle represented many times. So I'm going to say that 5 away from that leaves us 12. So what will happen is that'll be a 12,000 year cycle with the Earth stood straight in the balloon field until the time comes where it gets knocked off. And what happens here, it gets knocked off the plane here, downwards, just like our cycle did. It pivots from this point here. So it does the very same cycle that was just started on our own. And then at the very same cycle, at the very same time, the Sun's plane, this plane here, starts to drift up, but it drifts up as I've shown you in the 65,000. Its drift is not that way, nor that way, but then it starts to flip like this. And it is in this flip process like this, where this plane starts drifting this way, whilst the Earth's plane of rotation around the Sun still remains the same. It still comes down here, and at the 2,500 year mark of a 5,000 year cycle, it's 5,000 years because the Earth is not pulling the Moon with it. It crisscrosses and intersects with the Moon on a 10.5 month year, twice a year. So it's giving the ovulation period, once the cycle starts here, of about once every, or twice I should say, every 10.5 months. That's pretty much the same sort of thing. 10.5 months with a slight increment that we've been talking about is still happening. It's still incrementing slowly as well as it's flipping. So it's creating star signs in all the star signs within a 6-year period. But what happens is when it gets down here to location X, so in other words this one's flipped that way and this one's flipped that way, so when the Earth comes back down here to intersect with this plane at a 2,500 year mark, the plane's this way, but the Earth's still standing with its north-south, in respect north and south where it started from, exactly the same. It's not going to flip this way or flip that way, it's still lying this. So in actual fact, when it comes to the plane like that, it's like it is when the Earth is getting pushed in from the outer ring here, when it's laying flat. It just goes through it. And the velocity of the plane shifting that way and the velocity of the plane shifting this way, they just intersect and just keep going past each other. The big thing that we've got to consider here is that once that starts drifting over that way and the Earth starts coming back up this way, that is where our pole shift starts to take place, and the Earth is beginning to be more and more and more within a field that's opposite of what it crossed the line here with. And like anything that's kept in a field long enough, over time it will just change its polarity. It doesn't mean the Earth's going to go like this or whatever. It's just like there are many substances on our planet that perform exactly the same way. You can put them in an electronic field, or I should say a magnetic field, and held in the field long enough, which is what the momentum of Earth is doing. It's not allowing it to do it because it's not a strong enough field to rip or tear or do whatever. It is in actual fact strong enough though to over time change the polarity of the Earth itself. And that is what happens, so that when it comes back up here, it's not two fields attracted to each other like it is with ours, where we're coming into the narrow portion and going to go bang. It's actually an opposing field. So what it does, it comes up here, it's an opposing field, and they mesh together, and eventually the planet just rolls into the plane, sits there, and now it's locked in there to the horizontal plane. But I do want to go on further than that because there's something very, very, very interesting now, because remember that when we kicked this plane off on this cycle, it was twisting anti-clockwise, where the two vertical planes were going clockwise. So what have we done? We've actually got now both planes twisting in the same direction, and the Earth is going to be absolutely throttling if in actual fact it comes up to this plane. So what happens here, either at this point here or at the time that this is actually happening, we are seeing something else happen. And the only way it can happen, and I'm saying that even with it going this way, going anti-clockwise, and the other planes going clockwise, the absolute best on the inner ring of rotation going in the direction we're going to be going now, the very best they can do is a 21-hour day. So they're going to have no show here. It's probably going to be very reflective of the speeds out here. The speeds of rotation out in the outer ring are 7, 8 and 10 days, 10-hour days. It's flat stick and going through fast, really, really quickly through space. So we're really going to have a situation here where you're going to say, well, what's the point of doing all that when the Earth's going to be useless? And I will bring you to this point here. I showed you this in my last video, and I have said to you, and I did have it up on Facebook, but I've since changed my train of thought. And I said to you that we're in actual fact showing we've got 3 visits here, and I did actually have our star system as being star system X. Right? And being each one of these being another star 8 light years away. This is how we're going to work out the speed of Nibiru through our system when it gets here. If in actual fact we know that it takes 3,700 years for a visit from Nibiru, we know it's travelling out and back and here, and it's travelling 16 light years in 3,700 years. That's how fast it actually travels, providing we are A. So if we look at this next crop circle here, I'll just zoom in just a tad so you can see the top portion a little better. That we've got Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune and Pluto here, and these are the inner ring of rotations here, and I believe we're going to see mass build up here with the removal of these planets to control and manipulate the planes. But we're seeing here in a given period of 16,000 years that we're looking at sitting in plane with the Sun here, or sitting on the plane with a straight axis, that is Earth. We're seeing Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus removed. We do not see Neptune taken here, it's still here. And it's at the end of the cycle because we can also see Mercury get taken out here. So we know we've actually gotten to the end of the cycle here where there is not going to be any more planets taken from us here. None. So if there's no planets taken by another cycle, it is safe to assume then that what we're seeing here is we are in actual fact star A, not star X, or like I said, A, B or C of a complex of stars where the cycle exists within. And I just said to you that if we looked at the other diagram that I showed you, that when we came here, we're now coming to a situation where we've got both planes going in the same direction and absolutely no show. None of controlling Earth to a point you could live on. And for that matter, there wouldn't be too many planets here that you could. I would expect what we're seeing here, that the pole shift has taken effect. We're actually seeing a situation where we are no longer the star A, B or C anymore. I believe we are being told with the cycle and the flip of the solar plane that we have changed. It's not physically a totally different star. Our star doesn't go away. What happens though, we do get another star back. We become star 1 or 2 within the sequence, because now we've had a binary star brought back to us, and we become a binary star system, which, by the way, is strong enough to create enough field, magnetic field spinning in an anti-clockwise direction to slow the planets and make them manageable within those two fields now that are spinning both in a clockwise direction. And I'm absolutely certain that's what they say, and I will show you another image now that will absolutely show you that exactly what I just proposed is more than likely the case. And I must thank Eva for this, because quite frankly this is actually where I was. It was amazing to see this yesterday. Only this, actually it was this morning, and I had half processed my video and then it got hung, and then I ended up canning the thing and adding little bits in here to fix up the mistakes I had. Well, not so much mistakes, but a little bit better understanding. So I saw this and I thought straight away, that's what I'm talking about. That the plane of rotation of the Sun takes 5,000 years to flip, as does the Earth, which is why they're meeting at 2500. And I wanted to show you that the 2500 year mark is because, like I said, the Earth, because it's weighing sideways and this is moving so and this is moving so, they just intersect and go straight through each other. It doesn't cause a massive amount of problems because the Earth's plane is at 90 degrees to the Sun's, and it just passes through. I wanted to show you that because in actual fact what I believe we are seeing, not just in that, but we are seeing the requirement of, I said, another star, and we are the other star. We won't be X, we won't be A, B or C, we are going to be 1 or 2, and they are going to be a binary star system. And what they're doing here is putting us, all our ancestors and our genes and the genetic makeup of each and every one of us, by the time we go through that binary star system, are in actual fact what we used to be, minus this behaviour that I've spoken to you of. It is unacceptable. It really doesn't take a lot of common sense, and how a person can be perceived, oh, let's chop up a baby and eat it. I really do not understand it. It is, like I said, it is a corruption of intellect, because it is beyond the imagination. It's beyond my imagination that somebody could do such a thing. Yet we have governments and people in power protecting the most despicable behaviour. I'm not kidding. But anyway, we move on. I wanted to show you that. There is one other picture I'll show you that is very pertinent, and it was to do with the fact that I said that what we were seeing was a representation of us going through, populating the galaxy, when in reality I did see something, and I believe I understood exactly what it meant. And this photograph is actually Brian Campbell's. It's not one of mine. I downloaded it. But there are many, many of these everywhere. They've been found all over the place, and they are an archaeological wonder as to what they are. I've just said that we are living in a confined space. Just like the pyramids themselves, with the corridors that you can hardly get through, the difficulty to move between the king and queen's chamber and so on. It is exactly the same thing. It's telling us of a confined space, not just within the pyramid, but within the solar system, within the star systems. And how many stars? So what we're seeing is the cycles that we're seeing. At some point our star system will be an X again, and then it will be an A again, and then it will be a 1 or a 2 again. And that's what we're seeing here. And what do we see? With the polyhedron, we see an exit off one given star in only 3 directions. We go back to our crop circle, and what have we got? A star with 3 possible directions. A star with 3 possible directions. Star. It's exactly the same thing. So what we're seeing is this cycle with that many functioning stars creating and filtering humans in a multitude of different, well, I'll say they're going to be far more advanced than the one we're in now. There is going to be worlds within here that are far better. I would imagine there's a couple of places revolving around this one in here that you don't want to be at, and I would expect that one is the one we are warned about in our religions. Doesn't matter what religion you are, every religion seems to say, yeah, well listen, if you do the wrong thing, this is what's going to roll out. Doesn't matter whether it's a religion that talks as in karma. People say you do something wrong, bang, something wrong happens to you. Whether it's a Christian faith, hell, heaven, purgatory. It's the same thing. There are doorways shown. Even the image that we see of the Last Supper has 3 doorways behind Jesus, as you can see. 3 doorways. We hear about a stairway to heaven and a highway to hell. There's something in between, there is. So there are people going to be left here. Whether our movement is away from the solar system at this point and stage of understanding, I do not know. I've seen other things that just the fact that Mars spins at 24 hours a day makes me think that that's the case as well, that we don't get to leave the solar system just yet. I would expect there are some that can. I would expect there are some that can, and you can actually, you're spiritually aware enough, you're a nice enough person to leave. And by this stage, if you think I'm putting myself into that category, you don't know me very well. I know me well enough to know I certainly wouldn't be on that the ship A+. That's my life. I did, however, and must have been good enough to at least get the privilege to learn everything we've learned. And I found it quite confronting as well, because I am a Christian by faith. To have to learn all this was a rather confronting thing. When we come back to Brian Campbell's photo here and understand that what we're just seeing is the same thing, we are seeing 3 exits off, just as we have those numerous other items. Listen, I think I'll call that a day, and I'll just say that I think at this point we've covered all I wanted to. And my son said to me today, you're making another video. You said the last one was going to be your last one. I said, well, the one I'm making tomorrow is my last one. So this is the last one I'm making today. So I may make another one at some point or another. I do have to actually go and find some other things to do, and one of them is pay bills, and I can't do that sitting here doing this. So listen, everybody, I hope you enjoyed my input, and for everybody else that's put in to help me do what I've done as well, I thank you all very much as well. I bid you all a fond farewell. This is Brian Whitten and E.T. Art. Have a nice day. Ta-da.